Hello, my name is Helen Hyde, and I would like to talk about tummy time importance for babies. So, I have 6 babies, and I only learned about the importance of tummy time when we had our third baby. She was actually several months already when I heard about it. But, anyways, the more you learn, the better you can do. So, I actually have our babies sleeping on their stomach because your airway is much more open when you're laying on your stomach than it is when you're laying on your back. So if you ever have a baby that is in the hospital, say they were born too early or for whatever reason they're in the hospital, most of the time they will lay the babies on their belly because their airway is more open. They can breathe better that way. So that is a big thing for me, knowing that their airway is more open. They have more air than they would laying on their back. That's huge for me. And also, so the back of the head, the bones that are in the back of the head are not fused together because when a baby is born, their skull is in many different pieces. And the reason for that is because in order to come through the birth canal, the bones actually overlap. And then it goes through the birth canal, and as soon as it's out, it pops back out into place. And this is designed so that you're not trying to give birth to an entire head, right? It is actually overlapped so that it's smaller when you're giving birth, and then it pops back out. But because of that, the bones are not fused. They fuse later on. So because of that, they actually shift out of place very easily. If a baby is laying on their back a lot of times you'll see that the back of the head is flat, or that it starts to be kind of lopsided on one side, or it looks kind of crooked, things like that, because the bones in the skull are not fused. So the bone that is right under your eye socket, that cheekbone, I believe it's called, is actually the strongest bone in your body, and it does not shift even from putting pressure on it. So when your baby is laying on their belly, they put their weight on that bone, and their head shape will not change at all from laying on that bone. So that has made a huge difference. Elodie's head is just very nice and round, exactly the shape it should be, not lopsided in any way at all, because she is almost always on her belly. So what I do now that I know more about it is, as soon as the cord stump falls off, then I start laying my babies on their belly, and that can be like laying on top of your chest or laying on your bed, wherever you want to, as long as it's nice and comfortable and, in a safe spot, obviously. And if you watch a baby when you lay them on their belly, even when they're asleep, you'll notice that they automatically turn their head to either side. They turn their head sideways, and then they'll be laying there sideways, and when they get tired and they need to turn their head, they'll actually pick up their head, turn their head around, and lay back down. This is amazing to me because they listen to their body. They can feel what needs to change, and they do that. So one of the things that I often hear is, well, isn't your baby going to bury their face in their pillow or their blanket and they'll suffocate, right? But if you think about it, your body needs oxygen. Your body craves oxygen, and it will do what it can to be able to breathe. So if you watch a baby, they wouldn't normally just lay there with their face straight down into the blanket. They will automatically turn their face so they can breathe properly, as long as they're strong enough to, right? So I've always watched to make sure that they're strong enough, they can do it and everything, but I've never had a problem with them turning their face straight down. Obviously, that does not mean to lay them face down on a thick pillow or thick blankets or anything like that. Still go about it in a safe way, right? But that's what I have learned now anyways, that it's much better for them to be laying on their stomach. And then for tummy time, you want to start as soon as the cord stump falls off. You can start, it doesn't need to be very long at a time. Do it as often as you think about it throughout the day, and normally your baby will start crying once they are tired, and then you can roll them onto their back again or on their side, however you prefer. The reason for that is because laying on their stomach strengthens their core, and your core muscles work with your back muscles. So as their core is getting stronger, their back is also getting stronger. Anything that a baby needs to do or needs to learn, they need their core to be strong. So what you need to do is have your baby on their belly as often as you can throughout the day until they get tired, obviously, even if you have to start with 10 seconds at a time and then wait a minute and then try it for another 10 seconds. And what you'll notice if you pay attention to it, it's actually really interesting to me. They will start off with their hands in fists where they have their thumb inside of their fingers. So they'll be laying on their belly with their thumbs inside their fists, and they'll just kind of lay there at first. Most of the time, they don't really pick up their head right in the beginning yet. They'll kind of start as they get stronger. And then if you pay attention, they'll slowly start where they have their thumb outside of their hand, and they'll start kind of trying to push off of the floor wherever they're laying to kind of lift their head up a little bit more. And then as they slowly get stronger, they'll start to kind of open up their hands so that their hands are open and to be able to push off the floor even more. As they get stronger and stronger, they can lift up more and more from the floor. And then as they get more and more strong, they'll start to tuck their legs in under their bum, so where they're trying to get onto their hands and knees, and you'll see them just kind of pull their legs in, and they'll do that a lot. And then as they get stronger and stronger, they'll start to kind of rock back and forth. If you've ever noticed a baby that looks like they're getting ready to start crawling, you'll see they go on their hands and their knees, and they're kind of rocking back and forth like that. They're not actually crawling yet, but they rock back and forth. And that just means they're almost ready to crawl, and that's very good. So then, as they get stronger and stronger, they'll either start to crawl, or some babies will sit first. It's whatever your baby does. But anyway, once they are ready to sit, they will, from that rocking back and forth on their hands and knees, they'll actually push all the way back and push themselves into a sitting position from on their hands and knees. Once they can do that, that means now they're ready to sit. So often you see moms holding their babies to sit and trying to teach them how to sit. So they'll hold them up in a sitting position, put some pillows behind them so they don't fall over and hit their head, and practice with them that way to try to teach them how to sit. The problem with that is their core is not strong enough to hold them up to sit if they haven't pushed themselves into that position yet. So a lot of times what I see when I see babies who they were taught to sit, not that they reach that point on their own, that when they're taught to sit before they're ready to, their back is actually quite rounded. They do not have a strong back, so they cannot sit up nice and strong. When babies were left on their belly enough so that they are strong enough and now they push themselves into a sitting position, you'll see that their back is perfectly straight. With our oldest two, I did not know about this, and I always thought it was kind of strange that they had kind of a hunched over back. It always looked like they were sitting kind of slumped. And then with our third is when I learned about this, and she was on her belly all the time. And with her, I didn't teach her to sit at all. She just, once she was ready, she was sitting. And I always admire so much how the younger children, they had such a perfectly straight back when they were sitting. And that's because they were strong enough to hold up their back properly. And then same thing with once they start pulling themselves up to stand somewhere, once they can do it themselves, that means they're strong enough to do it. It's better not to try to teach them how to stand somewhere because they're usually not ready for it before they do it on their own. And so a big question that I get is, my baby is a few months old now and constantly cries if I try to put them on their belly. What can I do now? So honestly, put them on their belly more. Even if you have to do it for a little bit at a time, pick them back up again, wait a little bit, let them rest, and then put them back on their belly again. The more you do it, the stronger they'll get, and they'll actually start to enjoy it. I've noticed now with Elodie, she's on her belly basically all the time. She's almost never laying on her back anywhere. And she actually prefers to lay on her belly because she can see way more. She's realized now that when she's laying on her belly, she can just pick up her head and look all around and be able to see everything. And when she's laying on her back, then she can't really see anything. All she can see is what's on top of her, right? So she's realizing how much more fun it is if she's laying on her belly, and she is strong enough now that she just loves to lay on her belly. I had a chiropractor appointment with her today, and that chiropractor is a very, very much for tummy time and things like that, and she checked Elodie's strength and everything, and she said right away that she was very impressed with how strong Elodie was because She just turned 5 months now, and she said that her pulling herself up to sit, her strength was at like a 6-month level. So she was very impressed with that, and that just proved to me again how important it is. But yeah, I feel like I'm probably going to remember something later that I forgot to mention, but yeah, that is kind of what I've learned about tummy time. Obviously, there's still a lot more that you can learn. Oh, that's actually reminds me of another thing I was going to mention. So the reason for learning all of those things in those orders, like pushing themselves up and then going on their hands and knees, rocking back and forth, sitting, crawling, all of those things, is because your brain has pathways of how they do each milestone. So they need to be laying on their tummy, and then they need to push themselves up, and then they need to go on their knees, and then they need to be able to crawl and push themselves into sitting. All these different things are in an order. And when they don't learn some of those, like say you never have them on their tummy, but now they've been taught how to sit, so they can sit, but they are never on their tummy, they're not strong enough, then instead of connecting those dots of how they need to learn something, the brain actually has to make a new path around those other things that they should have learned to try to get to that sitting stage. You know what I mean? So there's obviously so much more that you could learn, but that's just kind of like briefly. And then with that too, it's very important for them to crawl on their hands and knees and not bum scoot or army crawl, things like that, because when you do something with your right hand and left leg, or left hand and right leg, your brain makes paths to both sides of the brain, and your brain really needs those connections. So it's really, really good for them to do it that way. And if your child didn't crawl as a baby and they're older now, it's still really good for them to crawl. Get them to get down on the floor and crawl around with your baby. Get them to play bears, pretend they're bears, go on their hands and feet and crawl around that way. It's really, really good for their brain connections to be able to do those things.